conference, and today we have a special guest. We're so thrilled to be able to be bringing you experts in the field. This is Amy Mills, CEO of Emancipet, low cost, big heart. Emancipet is a low-cost spay neuter and wellness center. They have 2 locations in Austin and looking for their 3rd very, very soon, just north of Austin. So that's another thing that you can talk to Amy about, other than what we're going to talk about today, which is getting a seat at the table and influencing some policy in your area. And without further ado,
thank you, Lisa. Yay. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being here. I want to start by telling you a little bit of the story of why we decided to create this presentation in the first place. First, I live in Austin, and Austin has kind of become known in animal welfare as the place where, the city council and the county commissioners get very, very involved in animal welfare, and that's absolutely true. And over the last couple of years, we all who live here started getting a ton of questions about, like, what happened? Was that good? Was that bad? How did it happen? Did you want that to happen? And, what was that whole process about? We got tons of questions about that. And so that was kind of the first impetus of thinking about doing something like this. And the other thing for me personally was our organization at Emancipet, we have a really large contract with the city of Austin to provide free spay-neuter services. They subsidize, not 100%, but a portion of the free spay-neuter that we provide on what we call our free days. So 4 days a week, we have 2 mobile clinics. 4 days a week, our mobile clinics go into the community and provide spay-neuter, first come, first served, and they're subsidized in large part by the city. And so people ask me that question a lot too. How did you actually make that happen? How did that evolve? How do you get a city to give you money? So those were kind of the 2 starting points. And then the third kind of leg of the stool for me, for the reason why we wanted to start thinking about doing this, is I thought when I came to this job 7 years ago that my job was to focus on the work, do a really, really good job, and try to stay out of politics. And I clung to that belief rather desperately, and I think it was to my organization's detriment in those first couple of years, because I really, really thought that getting involved with politics was not only not my job, but I actually thought it would drag us down into the muck and mire. And so I kind of realized after a couple of years that not only did I have to get involved in politics, but politics was going to drag me in no matter what. And so I've kind of had a real change of heart about it, and I really wanted to find out what is an easy way to package this, because a lot of us are really intimidated by the whole prospect of getting engaged in local policy. And so I wanted to make it less intimidating, because I knew for me it was the scariest thing when I was a new executive director. So I wanted to kind of demystify it a little bit. So the process that I went through was I started interviewing people. I started interviewing policy directors, city council members, county commissioners, and I said, look, I want to do a presentation to my colleagues in animal welfare, and I want to know, what would you have me tell them about how to engage in policy, how to influence policy? And this presentation is the result of those conversations. So basically what I'm going to present to you guys today is everything that those conversations shared in common. I'm also going to try to sprinkle in a couple of the things that only maybe 1 or 2 people said, but I think are particularly interesting. But essentially what you have here today are the common themes that came out of all of these interviews, plus my own experience in that kind of format. So real briefly, what we'll go over is I'm going to talk about why I think you need a seat at the table, and I'm going to do my best at advocating to you guys for why it's really, really important. I want to talk about, I'm just going to present what I think is a really simple process for each of you to go through to try to start influencing local policy. And then we're going to talk about what are you going to do right now, today, and what are you going to do when you go home so that you can start this process. And it's very easy and approachable. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. You've all heard the phrase, or maybe you've heard the phrase, if you are not sitting at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I heard that and thought that that was one of those things that was really, really just all kind of dark and doom and gloom, and how could that be possible? And how could, me sitting in my spot as the leader of a small spay-neuter clinic, how could I ever be on the table? How could I ever be on the menu for, policymakers? And that is a lesson that I really, really learned the hard way. And I'm going to tell you the story of the first time I realized, like, oh crap, I might actually be on the menu. So that program that I was referring to, our Free Day program, that's a program that predated me coming to the organization. It got started back in 2001 by a city council member who really, really cared a lot about animals. And it had been a program that had been going on so long, because now it's 2013, it had been going on so long that everyone just kind of took it for granted. The citizens in our community just know that it happens. They don't know who pays for it. It's just part of the landscape of our community. Everyone knows that Emancipet has free days. So in 2008, after the big recession hit, the city of Austin was facing a really, really challenging financial time, and like everybody. And what they decided to do was they made a list of programs that they were currently funding, and they put it out to the community, and they said, we're going to cut a bunch of these programs. You guys debate which ones we keep and which ones we don't keep. And our program was the first one that was on the list. And up until that point, I was in that space of feeling like I don't need to engage in politics. I did not have relationships with anyone in a city council office. I had kind of the confidence that a couple of our board members had told me, like, oh yeah, I know, council member so-and-so really, really well. This one, I was in Leadership Austin with this other council member, so I kind of thought that we had connections that I could use if we needed to. And what I learned from that process is we did not have connections that we actually needed to have. Our organization had to launch into a massive public awareness campaign, getting people out to these series of town hall meetings so that they could actively vote on making sure that our program stayed. It was the only thing that we did as an organization for about 3 to 4 months. It was extremely expensive. We ended up being okay in that process because we got enough people to call and email. But I don't think that if I knew what I know today about politics, if I had known that then, I don't think our program would have ended up on the table. It's not that expensive of a program. It was just there because there's no personal connection. So that's kind of my little story on that. So the why bother of all of this, I think bottom line, if you run a nonprofit animal welfare organization, at some point in your career, you are either going to have to advocate for something that you think is going to help animals, and that could be a bigger budget for the city. It could be subsidizing some public program like public spay-neuter. It could be closing night drop boxes, changing feral cat ordinances, anything like that. You may find, and I think you will find, that you want to make some change at a public policy level. If you don't, and I still think you will, but if you don't, the other side of that, you will find yourself wanting to advocate against something that may harm animals in your community. And it might be your perspective as an animal welfare professional that it will harm animals, and it might be the council's perspective who doesn't really know anything about animal welfare that it would be totally great. So you are going to be thrust into that no matter what. I think the two sides of this coin always apply, and it's always worth keeping that in mind. That no matter what, even if right now today you're sitting here in this room and you don't have a single thing that you need to fight against or fight for, you still need to engage in this process now because that time is coming. That day will come, and it has come to us many, many times. So let's start with this. So why SME? SME, subject matter expert. All of you sitting in this room are subject matter experts. When I sat down and started doing all my interviews with city council members and policy directors and policy aides, they explained this process that I did not understand before about the role of the subject matter expert in their goal of creating good policy. No city council member, no mayor, no county commissioner wants to make bad policy. Their job is to get elected to make good policy, and if they want to get reelected, they have to keep making good policy. Depending on the size of the community that you're in, they might have a policy director or multiple policy directors on their staff that can help guide them, and they might even be subject matter experts. But what I found in animal welfare, there are not subject matter experts in animal welfare at City Hall and at the County Commissioner's Court. There are people who are interested in animal issues, but there are not people with any depth of expertise in the kinds of things that you all are experts in. So you are the best person in your community to advocate for animals. And my best advice is to start thinking of yourself as a subject matter expert and try to, in the process, start branding yourself as a subject matter expert. So one of the things that I was told is if a council member is looking at an issue, say a citizen has come to them with something that they want to have changed, it can be anything, but let's just talk about let's use the closing night drop boxes as an example. Citizens will come in, they will say, we want this closed, we want them to stay open, they will express both sides. That council member is lost in that conversation. They don't know, what or why. They are desperate for a subject matter expert to come forward and say, this is my perspective on this issue. They want you to do that, but if they don't know that you exist and you don't have a personal relationship with them, they're not going to seek you out. The thing that we used to always bemoan in Austin was people will go to the city council constantly, go to the county commissioners constantly with ideas. And we were like, but we're right here, we're running these programs. Why can't they just call us, pick up the phone and call us and say, what do you think about this? But they're not gonna do that without a really, really strong personal connection first, is kind of the main thing that we learned. So at the end of the day, you have to start thinking of yourself as a subject matter expert, and you don't need to learn anything else to do that. You are right now sitting in this room a subject matter expert, and it's really important for you to think of yourself that way. It also, I think, gives you a little bit more confidence when you walk in that room. I know I was so intimidated as heck when I walked into my first city council member and said, let me talk to you about this. But thinking of myself as a subject matter expert really helped take some of the kind of nervous energy out of that conversation. Okay. This looks totally different, and this is something that you're probably all familiar with. Raise your hand if you are the either fundraiser or chief executive or executive director of your organization. Okay, so all of you guys have probably paid a consultant to tell you this. This is a major gifts fundraising cycle. The reason I wanted to point this out is because all of you know how to do this already, and the process for engaging in public policy is honestly, it's almost identical. So this process of the ideal major gifts fundraising cycle with an individual is that you start by identifying your donors, you move into cultivation, so you have 3 to 10 opportunities to connect with that person and get to know them. You move to the solicitation phase where you actually ask for a gift, you receive your gift, and then you're in this cycle. So this cycle is you get a donation from somebody, you engage in some stewardship activity, you engage in some stewardship activity, you engage in some stewardship activity, you ask them for another gift, you receive the gift, and you stay in this cycle. So all of you are probably familiar with this cycle already. Stewardship in this means meaningful communication. So some form of connecting with those people and sharing information with them in a way that's really, really important to them and meaningful to them. You guys do this all the time. There is something to be said for, in public policy, getting a win, getting an advocacy win on something is really, really similar to receiving a gift from somebody. That person has said, I've heard what you have to say, and I'm willing to take some action for you. I'm going to make a donation, or I'm going to vote the way you want me to vote on this particular set of policy. I view this as a really, really similar process. Now, this is really, really complicated, so what I thought we could do is think about it in a simpler way. And I think this really boils it down. Advocacy is a cycle that ends with advocacy. It doesn't start with advocacy. And that was another key mistake that we made in Austin, is when we had an issue, whether something we wanted or something we didn't want, we went right into advocacy and we tried to cram all 3 of these things together. But relate means building relationships. Educate means sharing information about the issues with your policymakers, and advocate means actually asking them to take an action on your behalf. And in a second, we're going to go through all these in a little bit more detail. But the most important thing, and the thing that everyone I interviewed basically begged me to make sure everybody knows, is that if you don't start with relate, then educate, advocacy is not going to work. There is almost a sense of resentment from policymakers who only get hit by a subject matter expert when they've got the agenda already sitting in front of them, the council decision is this Thursday, and you call them on a Tuesday and say, wait, stop, hold the phone, I don't want you to do this. They view it as disrespectful and a disengagement from what their lives are actually like. So this was really, really hard for me because I thought they're busy people. I thought being respectful was staying away until there was an issue to actually advocate for or against. And what they told me was that's absolutely not true, which is fascinating. Let's talk about Syria for a second. A couple of weeks ago, before everything was tied up into a nice little bow on Syria, I was watching one of the political shows about Syria, And the show was about how President Obama was shopping this idea of having the airstrikes in Syria, and he was going to people on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, and all of the people interviewed on this particular show I was watching said, Obama has never played golf with me. He has never taken me out to lunch. And now suddenly he wants my support on, bombing Syria. And I thought that was totally fascinating because my expectation is, you're in Congress or you're a senator and you are weighing this issue of, potentially going to war. It should be about the issue and whether it's good policy. And they're sitting there on TV saying, he's never played golf with me before and it really hurt my feelings. And I loved hearing that in a way, as horrifying as that is, because that's what this is. Because Obama didn't relate to all of those people and put all of that time and effort into building relationships. And so now they were saying, you can't just skip right to advocate, even if you're the president and even if it's about going to war. So if when the stakes are that high, this cycle still applies, I think it definitely applies if we're trying to talk about changing feral cat policy or changing the rules on night drop boxes at our shelters. So I just thought that was a funny little aside. We'll talk about abortion next. Just kidding, we won't. So let's kind of go through the phases of this cycle. So let's talk about building relationships. This was an awesome insight when I was talking to everybody. Basically, they said there are two groups of people that you have to meet with: issue leaders and newly elected officials, or about to be elected officials, which is an interesting thing. Here is overall what they said. How many of you, your local city has a city council, specifically city council with a mayor? Yep. And how many of you have you're under a county commissioner or more like a county court? You guys are? Okay. And there's some parish kinds of things too. Does anybody have a form of government that is not either a city council or a county judgeship, a county commissioner? Okay. So in all of these, Austin's really, really unusual. We are governed by a city council. Then we're also in Travis County, so there's also a commissioner's court. So what I'm looking at when I think about who am I going to connect with, I've got a city council and I've got a commissioner's court. The really unusual thing about Austin is that we don't have single-member districts. Does anyone in here not have single-member districts? That means that your council members represent one part of town versus at large, they represent the entire town. Because in Austin, every city council member is at large. They all represent the entire city, which is dumb. And we're changing it. It makes things a little bit more complicated for us because it's not like you can just go to your district representative. Everyone's on the playing field for forming relationships. So it's a larger list. But bottom line, you need to have a relationship with the majority, not with everybody, but the majority of policymakers on whatever your local city council or county commission is. So if there's 7 members, you need to target 4 for building relationships. If you have 10, ideally you could have 6. So you've really got to decide strategically who you're going to form those relationships with. My question was, why not form relationships with everybody? The advice was to not. The advice was you need strong relationships with the majority, but A, don't waste your time on some of the others, but also that some council members like things to develop into issues that are their issues. And so having the relationship with everybody on the council is sometimes counterproductive. So basically, what you need to look at is if anybody in your county commission or city council has been newly elected, you have to target them first because newly elected and their staff are dying for you to come and talk to them. They want to know what's going on. They feel like they are awash in a sea of information and you are going to be their anchor. But then there's also issue leaders. So issue leaders are your council members who have done something to take an interest in this issue. I found this harder with animal welfare. When I first started this process, there weren't a ton that were like, animal welfare is my issue. But it actually became that way over time. So in the last city council election, we actually had somebody run on the issue of making Austin a no-kill city. In the city of Houston, the mayor, Annise Parker, when she ran the first time, one of her campaign promises was to make the city of Houston a no-kill city. So if you've got people like that in your area, those are people who are self-identifying as, I want this to be my issue, or one of my issues. Usually they have figured out that animals are something that people get really excited about. But you've got to just find people who have a natural affinity with animal issues, and you can either find them and identify them as issue leaders, or you can turn them into issue leaders by finding somebody who already has some of an existing passion. So this was the advice that I got on how do you find those people. So if you've got, your 12 members and you're looking for your majority that you're going to pick to actually invest your time in these relationships, the first thing they said was go and look at their election websites. So even if they've been in office 5 years, the website that they set up when they first got elected is probably still up there, and they will actually list the issues that they care about on there. It was really, really cool to go and do that because it kind of helped weed people out. If somebody says, I'm going to lead on parks and transportation and affordable housing, and there's just no kind of mention of animals, they're not going to go on my target list unless I can find some reason to put them on the target list. A great example is there's a council member in Austin who is kind of in the environmental seat. He's the environmental candidate. But we knew that his parents were very affiliated with one of the nonprofit animal welfare groups in town, and that he had had some experience with some feral cats. So he ended up on our target list, even though he didn't start off that way and even though he didn't look like he was going to be an issue leader. And he's definitely not the issue leader, but he's on that kind of list of people. The other thing is to review their personal and public Facebook pages and their all their social media, which sounds a little bit stalkerish, and a lot of what I'm about to say is going to sound super stalkerish. But they will have their public election, and during their office, they will most likely have a public Facebook page. They also have a private personal Facebook page. See if you can go to both and look at them. If they're on Twitter, that's even better because Twitter gives you an opportunity to engage and kind of blow them up and give them a lot of praise for the things that they're doing. But look there and see. You're looking for photos of pets. Do they have a dog? Do they talk about going to the shelter? Do they talk about feral cats in their community? Read the comments and look to see if somebody said, hey, what would you do about my neighborhood is overrun with cats? Look to see if they responded on that and how they're responding to those things. So you're watching for some kind of sense of who they are. We were talking to another community the other day, and somebody that they said, no, this guy does not care about animals, we would never go to him, he's not on our target list. I looked up his bio, and his bio at the very bottom said, I've been happily married for 25 years, and we love our daughter, our golden retriever, Amelia. And I was like, if on his public bio he says that his golden retriever is his child, he should go on the target list. So you gotta have to look for those little clues. The next one is reviewing boards, commissions, and subcommittees. Most of your council members are actually going to have to serve on a subcommittee or kind of a different council. It's important to know where in your city government animal welfare issues fall. They will often be, well, in Texas, they're either Health and Human Services or under the police department, police and public safety. Do any of you guys have a different place, a different location for animal welfare? Is animal welfare its own department in any cities? Awesome. Where are you guys from? Miami-Dade, okay. So you have to kind of know where it fits. So in Austin, for years and years, animal welfare was under Health and Human Services. So knowing which council members are on the Health and Human Services subcommittee, because subcommittees is where a lot more work gets done. Not all of the work actually gets kicked up to the entire council. So if you know about that, then those people that are on that Health and Human Services subcommittee should go on your target list as well. So just be aware of where they sit, where they spend their time, because that is, even if they don't like animals, they're sitting on that committee makes the job, it makes it more relevant to their job and doing their job effectively, and so they're going to appreciate you reaching out. And then, of course, reviewing any articles written during the election or any kind of public comments, anything that you can see about them that you can kind of gather up. And you're basically going to go through this process and you're going to say, okay, look, here's who I think the natural issue leaders are, and here's who the newly elected officials are. If you've gone through that process and you still don't have a majority, you're going to have to go through some judgment process because you still need to interact with and reach out to the majority of the members on the body. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. I mean, honestly, you can just, one of the best ways, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a second, is to ask when you're going and having your introductory meetings, which we're about to talk about with these people, you say, who else should I be talking to? So they will recommend some of their colleagues to put on the list as well. And that's the final kind of suggestion for how to round out your list of people. Okay, so more stalker stuff. So how do you build relationships with people that you don't know who are very, very busy? Number one recommendation is show your face at a council meeting. So how many of you have never been to a council meeting in your community? So good. Okay, good. So go to a council meeting, sit there, watch the entire thing, show your face. When they have a break, you can run up afterwards and say, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself, you know, good job. Or I just wanted to introduce myself, hi, my name's Amy. Whatever it is, you're just gonna go up and introduce yourself. You're just gonna find a way to kind of get in. And a council meeting is a really good opportunity to do that if there's an opportunity to do that when there's a break. Council meetings in Austin last all day. They're usually 12-hour, ridiculously long affairs, so there's a lot of breaks during the day. We also have a break for live music because it's Austin. So live music break is a good opportunity to do that. Every city is different. That's surprising. So the next thing you're going to do is you are going to determine what downtime is for your council. And this was one of the ones that they were really hammering me to say, make sure everybody understands downtime. So you do not call and ask for an introductory meeting during budget season. You don't call and ask for an introductory meeting when the thing that council member is a real issue leader on is embroiled in. So for example, if that person is a real issue leader on kind of downtown redevelopment, and there is a giant case going on about, you know, how a hotel got a tax break and, you know, the citizens are really mad about it, and you know that's going to take 6 hours on the agenda, that's not the time to call and talk about the animal shelter or animal welfare issues. So have some awareness about the natural cycle of your council. When is budget season? What is the fiscal year? And make sure you go during a time when they are not just slammed with other things and other issues, where they have some space in their calendar. And all you're going to do is you're going to call the office and you're going to ask for a 30-minute introductory meeting. When you make that call, what you're going to say is, you know, I'm Amy, I represent an organization in the town. I just want to come and talk to you a little bit about what we do, talk to you a little bit about the constituency that we represent, because I think that it's something that would be really interesting for you to know. That's all you're going to do. If they say the council member can't meet with you, but their staff can, take it. In my experience, the staff are actually better at understanding issues and will go deeper onto detail than the council members will themselves. You should still try to get FaceTime with the council members, but getting staff is not a bad thing. Getting staff is actually probably a good thing in my experience. And then the really stalker stuff is to run into them at social and political events. It'll be pretty obvious what kind of issues they care about, especially if you're already following them on Facebook and Twitter and all that. They will be like, I'm really excited about the Planned Parenthood event tonight, and guess where I'm going to be at the Planned Parenthood event tonight. So that's really awesome. Or they'll talk about their favorite restaurant that's in their community, and so you might just go there for dinner a lot more. What I do a lot is there's a coffee shop that's at City Hall. I try to make a point to have coffee there at least once a month. I just go and I sit there. I mean, not by myself. I have like real meetings. But I go and I sit there and I have my coffee meetings there, and people wander by and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. I was just thinking about you the other day. I need to come in and talk to you about some stuff. And they're like, great, call my staff. And you're like, then you have a reason. And the staff say, you know, oh, what is this about? And be like, I don't know. He just asked if he could have a meeting with me at the coffee shop the other day. So you need to be there and you need to be seen, and you know, so figuring out those little places where you can go and you can show up. I know it's actually really helpful to be seen in a different context. I serve on another board for another nonprofit that's way outside of animal welfare. It's for a sustainable farm, and there's a couple council members who love that, and they always come to those issues and they're always like, oh, right, yeah, you don't just do animals. And that's a good thing too. It helps round you out and helps you look like, you know, not a crazy cat lady. So I think that there's, you know, some really cool things about that too. And absolutely just connect on social media. How many of you are on Twitter right now? Okay, good. More people should be on Twitter. It's just a really, really good opportunity to, you know, connect with these folks. One of our council members live tweets the council meetings, which I'm always like, maybe you should be paying attention to the vote, but I don't know. But that's a really cool way to stay informed. Connect with their staff too, and connect with them on social media and monitor what they're saying. Okay, so let's move into the education phase of this. So what are you going to do at your introductory meeting? You are going to keep your introductory meeting to only 30 minutes. If you have to mean what you say and say what you mean, you ask for 30 minutes, you're going to keep it to 30 minutes. You are going to briefly explain what your organization does, not in detail. You are not going to give them a ton of statistics out of your mouth. You can leave them with something on paper. If it is the council member, they will never remember your statistics anyway. If it's staff, you can go a little bit more into detail, but just briefly explain what your organization does. And by that, I mean, we care about animals. Like, that might be the level of detail that they're going to be able to absorb. We're an animal organization. One thing that I have learned is trying to get council members to understand the nuanced differences between your organization and this other organization is not going to happen. They lump us all together anyway. So this is about you having a personal relationship. You want to help them understand the organization, but it's about you having that personal relationship. Then you're going to do a little something to establish your status as a SME. I've been working in animal welfare for 12 years. You know, one of the things that I know from being a part of the ASPCA Community Partnership is I have a lot of access to information about what works in other cities and what kind of public policy is really good for cities like ours. Just little things like that. Don't belabor the point, but you're just establishing yourself that way. You're going to carry yourself professionally and like a SME, but a few little things like that that you can say would be really, really helpful. I always like to indicate the size of what I'm now learning to call our constituency. How many people are on your donor database? How many people are on your newsletters? We represent about 20,000 spay-neuter clients every year, 30,000 wellness clients every year, and we have about 10,000 donors and supporters who subscribe to our things. So that gives them a sense of the size of your reach in the community. I think that's a really, really important thing to do as well. Talking about it as a constituency is speaking their language. They understand that you guys have access to an audience. So what a council member hears when they hear that is voters. And that's why that's really important to establish that. The other two things are the most important. You are going to offer to help them. You are going to position yourself as an asset and a resource for their office. You are going to say, I know from my experience, from my 12 years of experience in this field, that animal welfare can be a political minefield. I want to help you make really good decisions. If you have a question about anything, there's something you don't know, there's data that you need, about anything related to animals, I want you to call me and I will be there and I will help you. You will need to make that offer genuinely and authentically and from a place where you honestly want to help them. It's really, really important that they know that. And then ask again, who else should I be talking to? Is there somebody else on the council that would really care about this issue that I ought to be talking to? And you're going to write those names down so that you can connect with them as well. After the introductory meeting is almost more important, honestly, than the introductory meeting itself. This is, all of you people who are professional fundraisers in the room are going to recognize this. You're going to send a handwritten thank you note to every single individual person that was in that introductory meeting with you. You're going to send it within a week of having that meeting. Handwritten note makes it personal because, again, you're trying to form a personal relationship. Even though you're representing your organization, you're really trying to get in there with personal relationship. Handwritten note, thank you so much for your time. And then your job is to start monitoring their agendas, their work sessions, and local news for anything that you see that comes up that their name is associated with so that you can use that as an opportunity to weigh in, provide support, provide guidance. You might go 6 months without an animal issue popping up. So I know that our city just finally voted in their budget, and it was this really long, grueling process. So during that, I was just sending text messages to my buddies who were policy people, and I was like, hey, just thinking of you today, you're probably working late. You know, like just little things like that. It's just keeping you top of mind for those folks. So you're going to just keep providing that opportunity. If you get a chance and they actually call you and say, I need some support on this, always, and this was really hard for me at first when I was thinking I had to be the best advocate, give them both sides. Tell them what your perspective is and say, now, there's going to be some people who disagree with me. Here's what those people would say and why they would say that. They need to view you as almost like an impartial provider of information and data. Yes, it's fair for you to say, this is my perspective and I feel really, really strongly about it, but my job is to make sure that you understand all sides, and I'm going to tell you what the other side of this is. The reason why some people are going to be opposed to this particular action. So it helps to paint you in this impartial light and helps you look more like an expert. If they do something good for animals, tell your constituents about it. put that up on Twitter, say something nice on Facebook, give them a thumbs up, give them opportunities to look good to your constituents. Every once in a while, you can send an email out to some of your donors if you've already got something good going on. In our case, it would be the free program. Hey, send a quick thank you note on our behalf to the City Council and let them know how much you appreciate this program. Most of the emails that they get are, you suck at this, I hate this town, I want to move, why isn't it more like Canada? You know, like they have, those are the kinds of things that they get all the time. And so when you give them the opportunity to get a couple of nice emails, it really, really goes a long way. And the give them a friendly heads up, what that is about is if they are about to walk into a political minefield, let them know. So that's just a quick phone call to either the council member or to their policy director that's like, hey, I just want you to know that what I'm seeing in the community is people are starting to get really, really riled up about the fact that this police officer shot that dog and nothing's happened yet. I feel like you're about to get hit with some stuff. Give them a political heads up. Whatever the issue is, if you're starting to hear people getting angry about something or there's a groundswell of something going on, call them and give them a heads up. Even if nothing actually happens, it's about you being known as somebody who's got their back, that's helping them make really, really good policy decisions. They love getting a friendly heads up. And then finally, invite them to your events. They should be able to come for free to your luncheons, your dinners, whatever they are. You know, recognize them from the podium. You guys are probably all doing that. But if you can, give them an opportunity to speak, give them an opportunity to be seen and to look like the guy that really cares about animal issues. Okay. All right, so if you have successfully stalked, built relationships with, educated your people, you have really, really good relationships, at that point you might be ready to actually do some real advocacy. So I'm not going to take a ton of time on advocacy because advocacy strategies should be based on what you're actually advocating for, but these are a couple of the top hints that they shared with me that I want to share with you guys. Okay, so what is advocacy? It is about a policymaker actually taking a specific action. So that may be a vote of yes or no on a particular item. It may be introducing some action. And generally speaking, the actions we're talking about are a resolution, an ordinance change, a proclamation. Those are the kinds of actions that cities can take and policymakers can take. And they're up at this higher level. These are not things like changing the hours at the animal shelter. These are much bigger policy kind of levels. So you have to have a specific action. One of the mistakes that we made early on was we would kind of advocate more generally for things that helped animals. They have no idea what that means. They have no idea why this person's perspective about something that will help animals is different than yours. You have to give them really, really specific things. In some cases, they said it's even helpful to, if you want them to pass a resolution to change the ordinance on the feral cat or leash laws around cats, bringing them a draft of that resolution, that same thing from a different city and saying, here's what that could potentially look like just to give this to you. Not in a way that disrespects their staff, like their staff obviously know how to do that, but just this is the kind of thing I was hoping for. So actually be really, really specific about that. So advocacy comes after relating and educating. It comes when it's appropriate in their decision-making process. So this is similar to the whole concept of downtime earlier. You can't, honestly, by the time it gets put on the agenda, their minds are made up. Even though that's not really how it's supposed to go, and the council meetings are supposed to be this place where public debate's happening, on the council meeting day, they know how they're going to vote on something. So you've kind of got to try to get in there ahead of time. You've got to get to this place where they're still making the decision about something. And if you have the issue leaders on animal welfare on your team already, they're the ones who actually know about any animal issue that's coming up. The other council members who aren't the issue leaders, they may be hearing about it for the first time at the council meeting, but your people aren't. They have actually been in conversations with other people in the community for a while by the time it actually makes it onto the agenda. So be sure that you're going early enough in your advocacy that you can kind of figure that kind of thing out. And that's where your relationships with policy aides and staff is actually more important than your council members, because you can give a casual phone call or a text message or an email to your policy director saying, hey, is there anything coming up that I should be aware of? Because that relationship goes both ways. And then finally, the when asked and when you aren't. I asked specifically about the value of these big email campaigns that you sometimes see. Email City Hall and tell them we are not going to accept this, and you try to get 1,000 people to send emails. I asked about that as a specific strategy, so advocating for this. And basically what I was told is that's something that council members will ask you to do when they know that they need that to show other council members that there's political support for something. So I thought that was really interesting. You don't direct that at your team. Your team should not get 1,000 emails from people that you kind of like went out and generated to get them to do something, especially if they're already supportive of your issue. But when you're having that conversation with them and you say, tell me what else you would need in order for this to go, and they say, there's no way this is going to go unless I can show a groundswell of support. Can you get 500 emails sent to the entire council? That's the point at which you would do that. So once you have this really solid relationship, your council members that are on your team and their staff are going to ask you for certain things, and they're also going to be like, do not do this. It's going to be a really bad idea. And so just be honest about asking for when things like that are helpful and when they're not helpful. Okay, so this is just a conversation checklist. Let's just say you have something you're advocating for right now. If you can do it, it's really nice to be able to have this conversation in person. So this is, you've had your 30-minute introductory meeting a long time ago. You've connected on a couple of things since then. So this is you're advocating for something. These are things that would be helpful to do in that conversation. If it can be face-to-face, thumbs up. It doesn't have to be. It can be over the phone. I don't love doing it by email at all. I try to get on the phone or in person no matter what. It's just a lot easier for them to be able to ask you questions to clarify. But you're going to start by just clearly articulating what you want them to do. I would like you to draft a resolution that directs the city manager to explore this issue. You really don't want to leave a lot up to chance. You want to be very specific with what you want. You explain your side, your reasons and perspective, and then as we said earlier, you're going to explain the other side. Here's any pushback you're going to get. I think the pushback is going to come from these people or organizations, and here's why they feel that way, and here's why I still feel the way I feel about it. You're going to provide backup information and data, not, again, verbally, but in a packet that you're going to leave with them. And again, if they're supportive of you, or if they're the issue leader, you're going to say which other office needs to hear this message. Because even if it's somebody that's not on your list, if they say, you got to go and talk in person to so-and-so because they're never going to go for this, you go and talk to that person. So you kind of, continue that process of asking for what they need. And again, what else can we do to help this particular action pass or happen? What support do you need from us? Do you need our board members to do something? Do you need our constituents to do something? Do you need me to personally do something? And what does that look like for you? So that is the process. Lisa's going to pass out something right now. What time do we have? What are we? Okay. So this is your to-do list for what you need to do to get started on this process right now. And I really, really hope that you guys feel excited and energized and able to take this process on. What you need to do is you need to make your target list of policymakers. And what Lisa is passing out now, and Lisa will email this to you guys. If anybody, do you need to know who was in the room to know who to email it to? Yeah. Okay. So if you guys want this emailed to you, Lisa can email it to you. This is a really, really simple form, but it's something that maps out. It's a tool that basically maps out all of your interactions with your policymakers kind of on one sheet at a glance. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Lisa, again, will email it to you. But basically, this is your spreadsheet where you could make it actually, what it looks like if you guys are fundraisers is a moves management worksheet, honestly, mapped out for an entire year. So let's just assume that this is for 2014, and there's a couple of examples on there. What you're going to do is you're going to make your target list of policymakers. Again, newly elected, issue leaders, and then whoever else you need to fill the balance to make sure that you have a majority of each body. If there are two, like as I said in Austin, we have the city council, but there's also the county commissioners laying over the top of that. You want to be sure that both of those bodies are represented in that. So you're going to make that list. You're going to go through this process of kind of making the list. You're going to assign 2 high-level executive director, development director, if you have a public policy person, or a board member, and they're going to own the relationship. So on the sheet, you're going to actually say who owns the relationship. Then you're going to map out your relationship building strategy and schedule out your introductory meetings. And then at the end of this, you're going to make a preliminary list of potential advocacy areas for 2014. Are there any things on the horizon that you think you are probably going to have to fight for or fight against? And if there's not, I want to do a little bit of brainstorming on something that you could choose to do that might help get some of that process going. So let's actually, can we workshop through one of these right now? Do we have time to do that, Lisa? We do? Okay. Does anyone want a guinea pig for us? Their community? Anyone? We'll just kind of talk through it and we'll fill in one of the things.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah,
All right, let's do this one. Okay, so is there somebody off the top of your head in your community who is already an issue leader on animal welfare?
Yeah, we have two.
Two, okay, so what are their names?
Angelique Ashby and Steve Hansen.
Okay, so let's talk, so tell us why you think that they're issue leaders on this issue.
Well, Steve is newly elected. Prior to coming into office, he made a point to connect with the shelter.
Great.
To visit the shelter. He has supported our fundraising efforts.
Okay.
By donating.
Excellent.
Just a really good connection.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Okay.
Yeah, he's our first openly gay council member.
Excellent.
So we already have a great relationship with the gay lesbian community.
Yep.
The shelter does, so that was another good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was perfect.
That's excellent.
And then we have the vice mayor,
Mhm.
Angelique Ashby, very interested in the whole community cat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Always asking questions of me and having me weigh in.
Really good.
Yeah. So
Okay.
those two are for sure my life. Councilmember Fong
Okay.
is another big supporter, but that's because me and my chief animal control officer come from police, and we all worked together for 25 years.
Gotcha.
Former police.
Okay, so in your case, the way you guys would start filling out this sheet is basically those names would go in this first section, and there's a notes section, and everything that you just said needs to go in your notes section. So part of what you would want to do is make this sheet so that multiple people within your organization could actually see it and relate to it, and it doesn't necessarily rely on one person, but you would put all that stuff in the notes section, and then it sounds like you personally have a connection to those three people. To all of them.
Or maybe one council member.
Okay, so you would probably be the main person to connect with. So your name, there's a staff section on there, and that's where you just put the initials of whoever is going to be responsible for the relationship. And it's important to have, I like to actually have somebody who's a relationship owner and then a second as well. And so it's nice to have, if you have a donor or a board member that is influential within the community, having them as a second to come along on some of the meetings is a really, really good idea. And so assigning a second is really helpful. And here's the other thing too, because one thing that just came up with this is if you have an existing relationship, but you've never yet had the opportunity to have this kind of introductory meeting where you go onto their turf in their office, it's still actually a really good idea to do that. And so potentially what you can do with that is say, there's just a lot of new things going on at our organization, and I want to reacquaint you with some of the things that we're doing. There's value in the 30-minute introductory meeting, even if you already know them or somebody else in your organization already knows them. It kind of reestablishes baseline and lets them kind of remember what's happening, and it's something that happens so much with their daily life, so it's still valuable to do that. So basically what you would do is as you move across the calendar, so you basically have a calendar here in front of you that is January through December, and we're going to call this 2014. If you know what your fiscal year is, you should put a mark in the month that the fiscal year starts. Because knowing when the fiscal year starts basically means the 3 months prior to that are blackout dates for you going and asking them for anything. Unless you absolutely have to, unless something really bad is going to happen. So in Austin, our fiscal year starts in October, and so the 3 months prior to that, I'm not going to have anything going on. So on the Excel spreadsheet, we would just black out those particular months on everybody so that you're not going to even bother them during that time. It is a time where you could offer support and nice things to say, but it is not a time where you're going to ask for anything. So that needs to be on there as well. So essentially, what would you do? Let's keep working with yours. So on those people, what you need to start mapping out on your calendar is when would be the ideal time to have those introductory meetings. Whether that's something that you want to start right away, or what time of year would be the ideal to actually start that introductory meeting. And you would put an IM on your calendar when that introductory meeting is going to happen. So what do you think, based on how your city works and kind of what the budget cycle is and what's going on in your community?
I would say September would be good because
Okay.
that's when we're approaching mid-year budget decisions.
Oh,
and
good.
Budget augmentations.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And so that starts in September. So potentially August or September would be a perfect time for that. So for your people, you might write introductory meetings in August or September, kind of how you're going to split that out. And I would call a month earlier. So if they have a really, really busy schedule, so if you want to make your phone call in July or August and say, I'd like to set up some time to have 30 minutes to just come in and do this. I'd love to come in a couple of weeks, because normally they're not going to be able to, unless it's really downtime and there's not a lot going on. All of us live in pretty big, busy communities. They're not going to have time to get you in the next week or 2 weeks. So definitely give yourself 3 weeks lead time from when you want to have your introductory meeting to do that. The codes down at the bottom, you guys, this will be your Excel spreadsheet. Customize them however you want. What I put in there are some things that are just helpful things for you guys to know about, like when is budgeting going on? When are you going to do your introductory meeting? When are you going to do your introductory meeting follow-up? They're just helpful things to know. If you can map out everything that you're actually going to do, inviting them to one of your events, make sure that the invitation for that's something I'm so guilty of. I forget to invite them 6 months before our luncheon every year, and I always remember, like, oh my gosh, because they're not in our normal donor cycle, and so I always forget to invite them to luncheon until I started actually mapping it out like this. So when are they going to receive an invitation to come to your event? It needs to be way, way in advance, because their event schedule, especially going to luncheons and dinners, are way, way busy. So at least 6 months ahead of time for that. Another little thing on that, I always send a separate invitation to their staff. I want their staff to feel like I'm inviting them to come to this, not just like I invite the council member and if you can't make it, send your staff, because the staff often feel a little bit, like they're the lowly kind of stand-ins. So that's why I send a separate invitation to them and say, you know what, I really want you to be there. You've been really good for us. So are there other things, other than the codes that are kind of on the bottom, are there other things that you can think of in the life of your organization or your community that you would want to actually put on a calendar and map out?
Well, one of the things that I like to do is provide them with quarterly statistics of what's occurring in their districts as it relates to animals.
Great.
Whether it's the number of strays or the
Yep.
number of bites.
That's brilliant, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
map it.
Yeah,
Really, literally map it.
Yep.
So that they can see the dots.
that's really, really good. And what format are you delivering that information to them in?
Electronic.
Okay, so you're sending that over to them.
Yeah. If
Okay.
we want them for community meetings, for example, large, we'll do that.
Yeah, okay, that's really, really good. That's a really good thing that you could actually map out on this schedule. So when are those things going to actually go out? And start to make it, some of this stuff, this is how I feel about this presentation. There's nothing that I just said that you guys don't already know. It's really about institutionalizing it within your organization and making it a habit and something that you're actually doing. And I know from my own kind of experience, like things that start off as really good intentions just kind of fade away and I kind of forget to do them. So anything you can do to kind of make this into a regular part of how you're doing business every day is a really, really good idea. One thing that's an interesting kind of idea that I've heard somebody talk about is anniversaries of things that they've already done. So on the 1 year mark of when they changed the ordinance on feral cats, the 1 year mark of when the night drop box closed, the 1 year mark of opening a new shelter, anything that you asked for in the past, on the anniversary dates of those, it's nice to call, send something and say, you know what, today is 1 year since you took this action and I want you to know how much it really, really helped animals in our community. So it's like fundraising. It's been a year since you made a $1,000 donation, and I really want you to know how much that meant to us. Finding little opportunities like that to make them feel good about the policy decisions that they've made in the past is a really, really good idea. And it's something worth mapping out as well, if you can know those anniversary dates and put those on your calendar as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Do you guys have any other ideas of things, opportunities for those kind of engagement outside of the context of your introductory meeting and before the advocacy or after the advocacy? Any other things that have worked well for you guys? Yeah.
Well, one of the things you can do, since you can't give them any gifts,
Right.
you can send them a certificate of appreciation.
Absolutely. Yep. Send them certificates. Have your donors or board members send them something appreciating their support. Emails, phone calls, always good. Absolutely. Yeah.
When I worked with the mayor's office in St. Louis, I spent a lot of time getting to know the staff,
Mm-hmm.
and much more so than the chief of staff.
Mm-hmm.
We would take, like at Christmas time, we'd take candy, we'd take flowers,
Yeah.
set of plants, because if the staff really likes you, they
Mhm.
will find a way to squeeze you into that schedule, and they'll go and if
Absolutely.
the legislators like working on the floor in the state house, they'll actually pull them off the floor for you
Mhm.
to talk. So my approach was always really become tight with the staff
Yes.
members, because they're the ones that will go the extra mile for you.
Absolutely. And, the example on that I always give about, so in Austin, our biggest issue leader on our local policy level on animal welfare, the guy who actually identifies himself as the no-kill guy, he, nice guy, comes to our events all the time, makes donations. I really, really like him. He does not actually know what happened in this town with regard to animal welfare. I often will meet with him and he'll say, did you know that only 4 years ago we were euthanizing 90% of the animals in this town? And I'll be like, I did not know that. That was bad. That I don't think ever happened. But but his staff, his staff know every detail, everything that ever happened, and are the ones that kind of steer him straight, even though he really wants good things to happen, but he can sometimes make, not the best decisions. But his staff are the ones that are absolutely worth knowing. They're the people who work the hardest, who have to know the detail, and they're expected to be SMEs, subject matter experts, on everything for their boss. So it's really important to stroke them and make them feel appreciated, because they do have kind of thankless jobs sometimes. Yeah.
We have a citizens advisory committee appointed by mayor and council
Yes.
that we meet with monthly
Mm-hmm.
to help us, guide us in policy decisions for the shelter. This group is scheduling a presentation to council in the beginning of October
Mm-hmm.
to keep them all aware of the progress that's been made in the
Good.
last year, and to thank them for the support of the shelter. So I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't go
Yep.
up there.
Right.
But they're going to do that for me.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's really, really good. Anything you can do to get other people to carry your same message is really, really helpful. I want to say one thing that was kind of a lesson learned for us too in the early days of our community partnership with the ASPCA. What we thought would be really good is to show strength in numbers and have us all, so myself and the executive directors of the other organizations, we all set meetings together with the council members, because we were thinking, well, they'll see, like, here we all are. We are the heads of all the large animal welfare organizations in our town, and we can go and we can advocate for these things. And I actually think that was a mistake. What it did is it turned us into a monolith, and they thought that we became, instead of becoming this really, really big force of kind of subject matter experts and a group of people that represented a lot of gravitas, we just became like a one. So when there were other organizations or individuals that wanted kind of opposite things of what we wanted and things that we viewed as really unhelpful, they were one and we were one. But if we had gone separately, I think, and formed those relationships as individuals, it would have allowed us to say, this is something that I'm really for, and then somebody else could have come in and said the same thing, and then the same thing, and hearing that repeatedly, I think, would have had more value. And I also think that there was a tendency for council members then, I don't know if this is an Austin thing, but council members in Austin kind of like an underdog. And by us banding together and say, this is how we feel, we instantly turned everyone else into an underdog. They weren't actually underdogs, but it looked like we as the professional animal welfare organizations had this perspective, and that we were kind of dismissing everybody else. And I think that that was a mistake. So while I think that the ASPCA partnership is a strength, and I think that the data being presented together at the community level is a huge asset, form your own relationships. And I think it's worth having consistency around what you say and talking about it with your other partners, but I think you should try to have your own relationships, just from my experience. Yeah.
I think of being a nonprofit, being part of government with a municipal path is a little bit different.
Yes, it is. It's hugely different.
We've been steering more towards a nonprofit where you don't
Yes.
have that layer
Yep.
of city council, or excuse me, the city manager.
Yes.
Assistant city managers, deputy city
Mhm.
managers. That you really can't bypass and jump to that next level. with
Absolutely.
council members. So there needs to be some inclusion with that.
Yes.
Also, part of etiquette needs to be, they don't want to be not a part of the loop and bypassing going directly with them.
Right.
And also, if you have council members that are assigned to different
Mhm.
districts,
Yes.
geographical districts, you need to be careful in not inviting your advocate council
Right.
members really not part of an event in the district without inviting that district council member as well. So they get
Yes.
a little offended with that.
They do. They get very upset by that. Yes, we have a situation going on in Houston that's very similar to that. So they get very upset by that. So that is a good note. So to kind of sum that up, making sure that if you have something, making sure that you are aware of who represent which districts, and that you're inviting everybody that would be appropriate to invite. And the thing about, I'm really glad you mentioned the thing about the staff. You should be approaching your city council about very different kinds of issues than you would approach staff with. City council is really, truly about policy, and you should not be going to them for a lot of really small stuff. It really is a change to the city code, a resolution to change something from a legal perspective that needs to be changed. It truly needs to be on a policy level when you're doing the advocacy. Now, you still have to form the relationships because you might need to have that advocacy, and that's kind of the big thing that I want you guys to walk away with. So start relationships now because you might need the advocacy. But when it comes to actually advocating, just make sure that what you're advocating for is policy versus a procedural change that staff people should actually be making. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a really important point. Yeah.
We have a unusual situation that we're a nonprofit spaditor partner,
Yes.
but not only do we have the county that we work with,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to work with 67 little cities within Miami-Dade County. Because
Yes.
they all come to us with the feral cat problem.
Right.
Can you help me and bring the Meowmobile to my city?
Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly the kind of thing they're going to ask for. And that's what can start to get overwhelming about this list is, so if you've got 67 cities and they've all got their own city councils and you have to meet with a majority of all those people, that's probably not going to be able to happen. So it's really just about finding the kind of big players that have the most influence over the most animals and starting to form your relationships with those guys.
And what we did was we partnered with a couple of the bigger cities.
Mm.
And we had them get PetSmart Charities grants.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
subcontract to them.
That's awesome.
And then we've used that to go to the other cities to partner with them.
Very cool. That's awesome. Good job. Okay, does everyone have their heads wrapped around how to use the tool? It's a really, really basic thing. You guys can choose to use that or not use that as you want. What do we want to do now?
Well, we have about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And we can take questions. Yeah,
I don't know it.
I'd say no.
I don't know. Do you want to trust this network?
No.
Oh. Really? We don't trust this network?
No. Well, we're not online, so yeah.
We don't trust.
We don't trust
them.
So I think that we can take some questions
Mhm.
now. We've been asking some questions all along, but we can take some questions. We also have some provocative questions for you too, if if things aren't coming up. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so all this sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, if you're a CEO of an organization, what percent of your time
Mhm.
should be spent on this versus the other functionalities of a CEO?
Yeah. So here's the way I manage my time on this. I have a list, and there's about 6 people on that list that are policymakers, and I own those relationships the way I own major donor relationships. So I don't really think of it in terms of a time allocation as much as those are my responsibility to feel like I have a good relationship with those people. And it takes as much time as, it's variable, so each person is a little bit different. But I have, so as CEO, I have a list of my major donors that are on my portfolio as well, and I just kind of lump it into that and think of relationship management with all those people as my responsibility. So that's kind of how I think about it. This is not something that takes weekly time. This is really something more. It's not actually that time consuming. The initial part, scheduling those introductory meetings, preparing for them and following up for them, and then if you have any active advocacy, is incredibly time consuming. But the in-between of that is really not that bad at all. It's not something that I even think about every day. It's just kind of, there are people that are on my list, and I do try to look at my list. I'm actually trying to get more disciplined about that, remembering who's actually on my portfolio and, thinking of them and kind of coming up with something. But I'm still not looking at that daily or weekly. I'm probably looking at that every other week and remembering to do a touch. Yeah. How many of you feel that you have something right now that you need to be advocating for or against in your community on a policy level? Do you mind sharing with us what you think it is?
Well, there are a few things.
Okay.
But I would
Yeah.
say, right, for my top of the list
Yep.
right now, because I think John's got another
Yep.
one, would be feral cats.
Feral cats, okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a feral cat issue? You guys do? Okay. What are the other issues that you guys feel are right now really, really pressing to have to advocate for or against?
Funding for the animal service agencies in our community.
Okay.
They cut them in '08,
Mm-hmm.
and getting money back to them.
Okay, yep.
Because you're right back in competing for the pot.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so increasing budget to animal services, changing some ordinances with regard to feral cats so that you can have a better program going. Anything else that are big policy issues?
We have zoning interfering with our rescue community.
Tell me how.
They want to classify them as commercial kennels, and they want to regulate if they can charge fees.
Got it.
If they charge a fee for the adoption to recoup some of the monies for vet care or whatever, then they're classifying them as a commercial
Interesting.
business. So we're
Okay.
working with the zoning people to create a whole different category from private kennel
Yes.
kennel to nonprofit.
Okay.
And they're, they support us, municipal agency, tremendously from transferring animals.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so zoning issues. That's really interesting.
Which will be an ordinance.
Yes, ordinance change, yep. Which takes the longest of all those different actions, yep. Ordinance changes are tough. I want to say, since you're talking about a budget issue, this didn't end up being a common theme enough from everybody to put into the presentation, but one of the people that I interviewed for this said something that really stuck out to me on budget increase issues. She said, remember that when you're talking about money, there's always 2 bites of the apple, which I thought was an interesting way to put it. Basically, she said that her advice would be to go to as many staff people within the city as possible first to ask them to propose more money. And if they don't, then go to council. And if they do propose an increase to the budget, go to council to say they didn't propose enough. So always kind of having that like one angle in staff-wise and then going to the city council. And I just thought that was an interesting perspective, the 2 bites of the apple theory. So what I thought was really interesting about that is it gives the opportunity to kind of say, this is something that we're advocating for, we're trying to get more money for animal services, but having somebody come in from the citizen perspective and say, they've added money to the budget, but we don't think that amount of money is enough. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think it's important also, this is where the partnership with the nonprofits and private and public really works. Shelley's
Mm-hmm.
a nonprofit group, and we work on the police department. So something that's vital and important to us as a municipal organization where we want to create an initiative may fall on deaf ears as we bring
Yes.
this up through the chief, through the chain of command.
Yep.
And it may drop at that level where we may even believe that we have advocates on higher up in the
Yeah.
council level. Now, Shelley is not bound by.
Exactly.
We can be deaf and quickly, but Shelley can take that agenda up first.
Oh,
and then
absolutely.
It comes back down to the chief level, like, yeah, I do want you to explore that.
Well, and I think that's really, really helpful because one of the things that happens a lot in Austin politics is we know what our partners at the city want. And from an advocacy perspective, if that is hitting a ceiling over and over and over again, we can go to the council and say, could you please explore, and this is one that that happens a lot, direct the city manager to explore best practices in X, Y, or Z. And so it's never, because it can't be, we want you to just give them more money. It's please direct the city council, city manager to do some research into this particular issue or into what other cities that have achieved the kind of goals we have, how much do they spend? Could you do some research? I would like, and so that happens a lot. So especially with the policy makers in our community, we have one who's actually a professor of public policy, really wonky guy. He loves to do those. So if I go to him and I'm like, look, what we need is more money at the shelter. There's no way we can maintain no-kill status with the budget that we have. So, but instead of saying like, okay, I want you to add more money to the budget, I'll say, could you please direct the city manager to research what budgets look like in cities that are actually no-kill and have sustained it. How much are they spending per capita on animals? So then at the city council meeting, what will happen is he'll say, city manager, I would like you to do a report for me on what these 5 cities are spending per capita on animal welfare. And then when that comes back, that paves the way then for that council member to say, well, I'm going to introduce a resolution or a budget item that says we should be in the top 50th percentile of those, cities. So there's a lot of different ways to get in and try to get change to happen in multiple bites. Rather than going directly to, we need more money in the budget right now today, we can kind of start laying it out a little bit. I do want to share, I think I will share, this is something, and I really debated whether to put this in the presentation, something that came up that I thought was really quite fascinating was the concept of getting a resolution that's a way paving resolution. It doesn't actually do anything today, but it sets a foundation on which you can get future advocacy to be more successful. So the way I found out about this was, Austin's gone through our whole transition and trying to become a no-kill city and a humane community or whatever you want to call it for a really, really long time. But before anything actually happened, I started researching resolutions that had passed by city councils, current past city councils. And one of the resolutions I found was a resolution from former Mayor Kirk Watson back in 2000, a really, really long time ago when we were certainly not a no-kill community. And all it was a resolution that says, be it resolved that the City Council of Austin believes that animals have value and should not be euthanized whenever possible. That was all that it said. But that resolution, once it passed, and it's non-controversial, nobody's opposed to it, once that resolution passed, city council members started referring back to that resolution and saying things like, we have a resolution that says that we think animals are valuable and shouldn't be euthanized when possible. So shouldn't we do something about that? And so I asked everyone that I interviewed about that resolution, what that was and how that works. And they explained that there is often tremendous value in getting a resolution that just states a philosophical position that later you're going to want action around. And they said there's a couple reasons why. One of the reasons is that city council members or policymakers, especially new ones, don't want to go and do something that's out of step with the past. They want to show that they're acting in a consistent way over time. They don't want to take a huge, huge risk. So if a policy or if a resolution like that already exists, it's a way for them to feel that they're acting within the kind of normal stream of how this particular governing body has always behaved. And I thought that was really, really interesting. When I was having this conversation, they gave me another example back, and it was on the funding side of things. Apparently, there's, so let's just use, so I won't say, any real examples. So if there is a nonprofit organization, and this is not in the animal arena, but if there's a nonprofit organization that's going to ask the city for money in the future for something, they want to build an X, Y, or a Z. Before they ever ask for the money, they go to a friendly council member who's on their their team and they say, would you pass a resolution that says the city of Austin is in favor of services like the services that would be offered with new building or new program or whatever, and we should do things to support that kind of thing. So basically, what was happening was this is a nonprofit that's going to ask the city for a couple $1 million in 2 years. But now they're trying to get a resolution passed that said, we're generally supportive of these kinds of programs and services in our community, and we should find ways to support them. And that's all that it says. Again, non-controversial. Nobody would say, why would we say that we're generally supportive of whatever the issue was, healthcare for low-income people or whatever. They're non-controversial, they get passed, and then later on when that council member wants to actually give that organization money, they can say, well, we passed this resolution 2 years ago that says we should try to find ways to support these kinds of programs, and now we have a way. This organization is asking us for money, and this is the way that we can do that. I thought that was pretty smart and sneaky. But I didn't know about it, so I wanted to share it with you guys. No teeth, philosophical, potentially quite helpful. Or at the least not harmful, right?
Do you all know of any of these that exist in your communities?
Oh, good question, because some of them might exist. Do some research in your community and find out if resolutions like that exist. Yes?
There was a resolution, but the wording of the resolution would not be what we would choose.
Okay.
And this is, I don't want to necessarily get into a debate about it, but we choose not to use no-kill
Right.
language in our community.
Yep.
What was put out as a resolution 3 years ago
Mhm.
involved no-kill language, but the concept was good.
Got it.
So is there an opportunity to change or override an existing resolution with the same concept, but just change the language, because the language is a bit significant in our city?
No, I totally hear you on that. I'm familiar with that experience. I don't know what the resolution actually said, but what I think we kind of learned here is the council itself does not know what that means. They have no idea what no-kill means. They think it means not euthanizing animals. They don't know what numbers. They don't know any of that. Yeah, who wouldn't be for that? I would venture to guess that if it just generally says things like, we should do what we can to try to be a no-kill community, or like those kinds of things, that it actually probably is enough to get the things you want done later without changing it. Unless it says something like, we believe in like the specific set of recommendations laid forth by this no-kill organization or this no-kill advocate, and we should do all of the things on that list, that might be harmful. But if it says, in general, we want to be a no-kill community, we want to be a safe community for animals, even if they use that language, you can use that to your advantage without ever having to change that.
I believe it cites Boston
Mm-hmm.
as a benchmark.
Yep.
Is that harmful or not harmful?
Here, so Austin. Well, we've been through the ringer in Austin, but having the ability to look back, there are ways to describe factually, and I can help you with this, and a lot of people from Austin can. The one thing that I think most people hear about Austin is that on one day our city council passed an ordinance that said there's now a moratorium on euthanasia. It cannot happen anymore when there's an empty cage, and that the next day we were a no-kill city. We don't have time to talk about that, but technically that's true. Technically, that did happen. I was sitting there that day. I watched it happen. They said tomorrow, tomorrow, no more animals will be euthanized in this community. The thing about that is, what gets really kind of brushed under the rug is that they had to spend over $1 million in the first, I think, 6 months in overtime pay in order to accommodate that. So the way I talk about that is the city passed something, and they made one key mistake, as they said when it went through budget analysis, it said that it had a $0 budget impact, because they said it's just a decision that you make, and it's no big deal. You just make that decision. But it had a huge budget impact, and so what actually happened, and what has made, and this is the good thing, what has maintained since then is the council made the mistake of thinking it had $0, but they also publicly said we're going to honor this, and since then they have spent more and more and more money every single year. We've had massive budget increases every year in animal services to maintain that promise. So the truth of what happened is that the city, outside of a budget cycle, immediately and overnight increase the animal services budget by over $1 million, and then the next year by another $1 million, and the next year by another $1 million. And so if you talk about Austin, I think talking about it in that context, even though that wasn't what people thought they were doing that day, they couldn't back away from it once they had done it, and that was not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah.
What is the per animal cost in Austin?
About $10. Well, I don't have a per animal cost, I have a per capita cost. We're spending about $10.91 per capita on animal welfare at the city level in Austin, which is higher than any of the other cities in Texas that I've looked at. So I only have statistics on that, but like, you know, the nearest is San Antonio. They're spending $8 now. San Antonio's been jacking up what they're spending. Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth are spending about half that, $4 to $5 per capita, and their euthanasia rates are, you know, much, much higher. But yeah, that's the secret of Austin is everyone thinks it was free, and it wasn't. We are spending so much money to maintain no-kill status in Austin. Not that that's a bad thing. I think everyone should be spending more money on animals, but that's the real story. So if you want to use Austin as an example, it depends on who you ask as to what happened here.
Can you talk about the difference between a proclamation
Yes.
and a resolution?
Yes.
From what I understand, like, a resolution has to be voted and discussed. Proclamation is very similar, it's proclaiming whatever.
Right.
Treat an Animal Kind Day.
Right.
But usually it's just signed by a couple, the mayor or a couple.
They're usually voted on though too. So, so in the actions, so an ordinance change, a resolution, or a proclamation being actions that you can ask for. A resolution, there's a huge range in terms of content of all of those things. So a resolution and a proclamation. Proclamations tend to be fluffy, easy, like you said. We just had one, we proclaim that today is Rescue a Pet Day. We proclaim that today is We Love Live Music Day. We proclaim that Austin is awesome. We proclaim that it's weird here. We proclaim, you know, like all these different things that we proclaim.
Do they have any value?
I do think that they have value. And I think that the strategic value of a proclamation is that it's one of those opportunities to do some advocacy, because I do think advocacy is an essential part of the cycle. I do think you'll stagnate if your cycle is only relate and educate. I think you got to do some advocacy. And asking for a proclamation from the people who are on your list is a chance to bond you closer to those people. Because if you handle it really well, if you say, listen, we're having a big 5K run this weekend, I would love it if you guys would do a proclamation that says, you know, we proclaim that it is, you know, Healthy Pet Fitness Weekend in your city. It gives you the opportunity to say, I would love it if you would come out and announce the proclamation to everybody at the start of the 5K runs. They have a chance to get in front of some voters. It's a chance for you to send it out to your entire constituency and give them some strokes. So I actually really like the idea of using proclamations. I mean, even made up proclamations, you know, it's, you know, Rescue a Pet Day or whatever it is, like you can make something up. I really like the idea of doing those. It makes them feel good, it makes you feel good, it makes your, it reminds the citizens in the community that you exist, especially if there's an opportunity to go down and receive the proclamation in front of, you know, a city council meeting. So I think they're really good. And a resolution can be something like really hardcore, like in Austin on, you know, March 10th, 2010, saying no more animals are going to be euthanized in this community if we have empty cages. Or they can be things that are like the softer side, like we said earlier, like we just think animals are awesome in Austin, and we're going to resolve that. But both of them technically have to be voted on. But a proclamation usually gets put on a consent agenda. So do you guys have councils that will use a consent agenda? So but if you're not familiar with that, basically it's, you know, those don't receive an individual discussion and vote. They get put on a consent agenda, meaning at the beginning, anything that's on your consent agenda, if they say thumbs up to the consent agenda, every item that was on that gets voted in immediately. Generally speaking, the things that aren't on consent agendas are things that are more controversial. So sometimes there's resolutions on consent as well, or at least there are in Austin, and I can't claim to, I'm not a public policy expert outside of that, but so there's sometimes a resolution, if the resolution itself is non-controversial, might get put on consent as well, and that's a good thing. You go to the beginning of the thing and they say consent agenda, you know, we move, we make it happen, and then that thing is over, and there's never any discussion at all.
They can get pulled too.
They can totally get pulled. Anybody can pull anything out of, the way a consent agenda works is the entire body has to vote on, yes, I'm okay with these things being on the consent agenda. So somebody could say, you know what, and that's another thing too, like if you notice that there's something on a consent agenda that you're like, that is actually not a good idea, you can say, I would like for you to pull that off of consent agenda. And I would like to recommend that you delay conversation about it for the next 3 weeks so that I have an opportunity to share with you why I think it, is different. So there's actions like that that you can take to kind of buy yourself more time. Yeah.
So we have about 5 more minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's gone really nice and fast. What we'd like to do as a wrap up, if you guys could maybe get in pairs or in threes or by yourself, kind of maybe write down on we have some sticky notes on the tables, of course, and if you could write down just a couple of takeaways from today, we'd like to report in to the higher ups of our conference our conference folks, and also just see, maybe get some ideas for some things for next time as well. So, and I'm just going to make a large sticky for your small stickies. Amy, do we have your email?
Oh, yeah, write it up there. Or you want me to write it? Because you probably don't.
It's I know.
Amy.mills@emancepet.org. Yeah. Amy. A-M-Y.
Would you be willing to share a PDF of your PowerPoint?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you?
Yeah. Lisa, if we